The first punch came without warning. Xalen Tarrow's head snapped sideways, the side of his jaw lighting up with a fiery jolt that shot through his face and down his neck. He stumbled, boots grinding against the composite floor of the observation bay. A coppery taste burst in his mouth. He blinked hard. One of the overhead lights had started spinning, or maybe that was just him. The alien, a hulking, three-armed brute with mottled blue skin and a name that sounded like someone choking on gravel, loomed over him. Its third arm retracted slowly, curling back to its side like a smug snake returning to its coil. "You are done," it said, voice low and guttural. Xalen spat blood. Not yet. He pushed himself up from one knee, hand trembling as he wiped his mouth. The impact had been clean, solid, and full of intent, the kind of punch meant to end something. He could feel a dull throb blossoming in his jaw, and his left ear rang like a broken bell. His knees wobbled. The alien looked to the observers lining the walls of the chamber, a half-circle of species from across the outer court. Diplomatic envoys, scientific delegations, and military attaches. Somewhere near the back, a pair of Allery scribes were already etching notes into their translucent tablets. "Human nervous systems are not designed to process high-level trauma," said the blue brute, addressing the room. "Observe the collapse." Xalen wiped his hand on his uniform pants and stood straight. His back cracked. "Still standing," he muttered. A murmur rippled through the crowd. The Allery scribes paused. The punch had been part of a demonstration. The aliens, the Varnok, specifically were pushing for a classification downgrade on humans. Not sapient, not even adaptive. Fragile. They'd cited 24 case studies, all cherry-picked, showing rapid human incapacitation under duress, pain intolerance, metabolic limitations, emotional volatility. Xalen's presence here, on the diplomatic deck of the Accord vessel Halidus, was meant to challenge that. He hadn't expected the Varnok to throw a punch before the preamble even finished. "Are you injured?" a voice asked from the side. Xalen turned his head slowly and saw Cellari Morn, the Accord's human cultural envoy. Her dark hair was tied back tight, and concern creased her forehead. She was already moving forward, but he lifted a hand to stop her. "Not broken," he said, though he wasn't sure. He touched his jaw again and winced. "Probably." The Varnok stepped closer, its massive feet thudding against the floor. "You will sit. You will not rise again." Xalen looked up at the alien. "That's not how this works." "I struck with 20% force," the Varnok said. "Your kind should be unconscious." "Well," Xalen grunted, "maybe your math's off." The room went quiet again. Then a low chuckle escaped from one of the Corellians near the back, a sound like wind chimes tumbling downstairs. Cellari stepped forward, addressing the gathered delegates. The purpose of this demonstration was to highlight human resilience under stress, not provoke unnecessary violence. What just occurred was outside the agreed protocol. "It was a test," the Varnok said. "We're not lab rats," Xalen said, sitting down slowly on the edge of the platform. "Well, not all the time." Cellari crouched beside him. "Let me see." He opened his mouth slightly. She examined his jaw, checking for misalignment or swelling. His skin had already started to purple on one side. "You might have fractured something. You need imaging." Xalen nodded slowly. "We done proving a point." The Varnok tilted its head. "You are not unconscious." "Curious. Let me offer something," Cellari said, voice sharper now. "You tested us on pain. We accept. But you let us define the terms next." The Varnok's lower eyes blinked. "Elaborate." "You struck him," she said. "Now you let one of us strike you." Xalen coughed a laugh, then regretted it. "You're kidding." "I'm not," she said. "You want parity? That's how we do it." The Varnok considered, then nodded. "I will permit a human to strike." "You may choose." Xalen groaned. "I'm not throwing anything with this jaw." "I'll do it," Cellari said. "No offense," he said, "but you're not built for the dramatic." She raised an eyebrow. "You have someone in mind?" Xalen leaned back against the wall, breathing carefully. "Yeah, I do." 2 hours later, in the Halidus medbay, Xalen sat with a cold pack pressed to his face. The imaging had confirmed a non-displaced mandibular fracture, not a full break, but enough to keep him on a soft diet and painkillers for at least 6 weeks. The medical officer had been blunt. Rest, no stress on the jaw, and absolutely no combat. Cellari stood at the foot of the bed, arms crossed. "You really think bringing in a Marine is going to help?" Xalen shifted the pack slightly. "Not just any Marine. I know someone." She sighed. "Make it quick." The Varnok are already posturing. Let them. They don't know what's coming. 3 hours later, the chamber filled again. Delegates reassembled, murmuring in their own languages, eyes turning toward the central platform. The Varnok stood ready, expression unreadable. Xalen sat this time, jaw taped lightly, sipping water through a straw. The door hissed open. Corporal Reigen stepped into the room, 6'4", shoulders like a weapons rack. His skin was dark, his expression calm, and his knuckles wrapped in reinforced mesh. He walked with the relaxed confidence of someone who'd never needed to prove anything twice. He glanced at Xalen. You sure about this? Xalen nodded slowly. He hit me with 20%. You get 1%. Reigen turned to the Varnok. Fair. The Varnok's arms flexed. Agreed. Proceed. Reigen moved to the center and rolled his neck. The alien adjusted its stance. For a moment, the room held its breath. Then, with a single clean motion, Reigen stepped forward and drove his fist into the alien's midsection, not a wild swing, not a haymaker, just a tight, controlled punch. The Varnok staggered. Its third leg shifted to stabilize, and it dropped to one knee. A gasp swept across the room. Reigen stepped back, shaking out his hand. 1%. The Varnok growled, low and steady. You possess density unexpected. Humans adapt, Selari said from the edge of the platform. That's our strength. The delegates began murmuring, several scribes documenting furiously. The Varnok stood slowly, staring at Reigen, then at Xalen. There may be recalculations, he said. Start with your assumptions, Xalen muttered through the straw. That night, back in the medical bay, Reigen visited Xalen. You'll be out of duty for a while, Reigen said, pulling up a chair. 6 weeks, Xalen said. Nothing solid. No shouting. No jokes. Reigen nodded. Pain's a bastard. Yeah, but I've had worse. Reigen raised an eyebrow. Really? Wisdom teeth, Xalen said. All 4. Same day. No anesthesia. Reigen stared. Xalen shrugged, then winced. Dental plans on Earth are brutal. Outside the med bay, the Varnok delegation requested a formal reassessment of human classification. Not because humans were invincible. Not because they were stronger, faster, or more advanced, but because one had stood up after a punch that should have ended him, and another had answered it with just enough strength to make a point. The next morning, the Halidus mess hall was unusually quiet, save for the low hum of machinery and the clatter of a single spoon against a tray. Xalen sat hunched at the far end of the room, poking at a bowl of mashed nutrient paste. He stared at it with the vacant dismay of someone who'd once known the joy of chewing. A small ice wrap was strapped along his lower jaw, and a thin plastic straw snaked from a cup of protein slurry beside him. Across the table, Selari balanced a datapad on one knee and scrolled through a cascade of diplomatic updates. Varnok Council issued a provisional pause on their reclassification push, she said, not looking up. They're requesting a deeper study on human body failure thresholds. Xalen's reply was a muffled grunt. They also asked for genetic samples. Voluntary, of course. His eyes narrowed. No one's signing you up, she added. I told them we don't donate DNA like fruit baskets. She finally looked up. You all right? He sipped through his straw. I'd be better with scrambled eggs. You can't eat solids. Doesn't mean I can't want them. A pair of small, spindly creatures shuffled past their table. The taller one slowed, turned, and tapped the side of its head with 2 translucent fingers. Its companion mirrored the gesture, and they both stared at Xalen with the curious fascination usually reserved for museum fossils. Xalen gave them a thumbs up. They scurried off. Selari turned her datapad off and leaned forward. You're trending on 3 networks. Someone from the Corellian media ring called your punch a testament to biotic absurdity. Not sure if that's a compliment. It's the Corellians. It probably is. He leaned back, then winced. How's Reigen? Still arguing with the ship's xenophysiologist. Apparently, the Varnok's third liver seized from the impact. He's fine now, just embarrassed. Xalen held up a finger. Wait. Third liver. Yes. Why would anything need 3? 2 filter toxins. The third processes emotion. Sort of. He blinked. That's the most alien sentence I've heard all week. Before she could reply, a low chime rang from the corridor. A broad-shouldered Grell ambassador ducked through the entryway, accompanied by a shorter, fur-covered aide trailing behind with a slate. They paused, scanned the room, and approached. Human, the Grell said, voice like boots in mud. You were Xalen of Earth? He stood up halfway, then remembered his jaw and sat back down. That depends who's asking. I am Yurik. I observed your encounter yesterday. The Council of Rotational Delegates requests your presence for an auxiliary demonstration. Selari narrowed her eyes. He's still recovering. We are aware. This demonstration is not combative. Xalen looked between them. Then what is it? Yurik stepped aside. The furred aide tapped something on the slate, and a small hologram flickered above it. A diagram of a narrow tunnel, jagged walls, and several sharp turns ending in a chamber labeled Thermal Variance Chamber. Xalen squinted. That looks like a heating duct. It is a structural maintenance route, Yurik said. Recently sealed due to repair complications. We require a being with narrow mass distribution, high tolerance for spatial pressure, and low panic response under thermal shift. You want me to crawl through a vent? Yurik nodded. You're asking for this because I got punched in the face and stood up. That is correct. Selari pinched the bridge of her nose. You can't be serious. We calibrated the parameters for a Varnok scout. They overheated after 4 meters and lost consciousness. Xalen set his spoon down. You're telling me the Varnok passed out in the vent? They possess limited dermal thermoregulation. Selari shook her head. This is ridiculous. Xalen stood slowly, stretching his back. Actually, maybe not. You can't even chew. But I can crawl. She stared at him. You're going to risk another injury just to squeeze through a heat pipe for bragging rights? They're not asking for bragging rights. They're asking if we can solve a problem they've failed at 3 times already. Yurik's aide held up the slate, and the diagram zoomed in to show a segment labeled Coolant Junction Lever Manual Reset Required. Xalen pointed. What happens if that doesn't get reset? Localized systems will shut down, including med bay ventilation. He looked at Selari. That's where they're keeping the Varnok, right? She didn't respond. They're not asking me to do something reckless, he said. They're asking me to do something they can't. She folded her arms. And your jaw? I won't talk. 20 minutes later, he stood in front of the duct's entrance, stripped to a sleeveless undershirt and light trousers. A thin film of conductive gel was smeared across his arms and chest, cooling his skin and helping regulate body heat. It smelled faintly of mint and something metallic. A maintenance tech, a wiry Toluan with 6 eyes and 3 tool belts, handed him a headset. This will monitor your vitals and relay position data. If you experience dizziness, nausea, or lose coordination, speak immediately. Xalen adjusted the headset. I can't really speak clearly right now. The Toluan blinked all 6 eyes, then vocalized with a hum. 1 tone for okay, 2 if you need extraction. He nodded. The duct's entrance flared open with a hiss, revealing a narrow metal tunnel just wide enough for someone to crawl through on elbows and knees. Faint orange light flickered further down. Selari stood beside the access panel. The moment you feel heat spikes, back out. No heroics. He gave her a thumbs up and crawled in. The first few meters were easy. The walls were smooth, though the space was tight, and the gel kept his temperature comfortable. He moved with careful rhythm, dragging himself forward with forearms, knees scraping slightly against the floor. His breath echoed around him, steady and slow. 10 meters in, the air grew warmer. Not oppressive, just noticeable. The metal beneath him pulsed with a faint vibration, and a red diode on the left wall blinked twice. He hummed once. Vitals steady. The Toluan's voice chirped in his headset. Proceed. The tunnel curved sharply, and he twisted to follow it, shoulder brushing the wall. Sweat began to collect at his temples. 12 meters in, the air thickened. He felt a sharp spike along his spine, the kind of heat that came not from temperature alone, but from knowing there was no room to turn around. The ceiling pressed closer. He kept moving. He reached the junction. A narrow alcove opened to his left, just wide enough to fit a single arm. Inside, a small lever blinked amber. He reached in, fingers brushing the handle. The heat surged. His vision swam. His jaw ached. His fingers closed around the lever and he pulled. A sharp click echoed through the tunnel. Then the air shifted, the heat dropped by 5 degrees instantly, and a breeze rolled over his back like a sigh of relief. Hearing coolant cycle, the Toluan said in his ear, "You did it." Xalen exhaled carefully, then began crawling backward. 15 minutes later, he emerged covered in sweat and conductive gel, eyes squinting against the corridor lights. Cellari handed him a towel and a bottle of electrolyte fluid. "You're either the bravest person I know," she said, "or the dumbest." He wiped his face. "Bit of both." Behind them, a Grell technician clapped twice, then held up a data tablet. "Your core temperature remained within safe range throughout. Your tolerance exceeded our expectations." Xalen leaned against the wall. "I want a smoothie. A cold one." Cellari laughed softly. "We'll see if we can requisition one that fits through a straw." Later that day, a quiet buzz settled over the diplomatic wing. The Varnok envoy, now fully recovered and notably silent, submitted a formal statement acknowledging unexpected human durability under both trauma and environmental duress. The Accord's Interspecies Relations Board requested a full psychological profile of Earth's diplomatic staff. And Xalen, jaw still taped and body sore, sat in the crew lounge beside an open vent, sipping a berry concoction through a straw while 3 different alien species watched him in absolute silence. He looked up. "You know I'm not going to fight anyone or crawl into any more ducts today, right?" None of them answered. They just kept watching. He leaned back and closed his eyes. Should have signed up for agriculture. By the next rotation, Xalen's jaw ached less, but the rest of his body had started filing complaints. His ribs felt like they'd hosted a parade, his knees were tender from the crawl, and somewhere in his shoulder a muscle had decided to stage a quiet rebellion. He sat in a shallow recline on a medical bench in one of the auxiliary recovery rooms, a thin analgesic patch stuck behind his ear. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic and something citrusy that the medtechs claimed was calming. He wasn't sure it was working. "You've got a high inflammation index," said the medtech, a needle-fingered Alarsi with a voice like someone whispering through a fan. But no internal tears, no hematoma spread. "The feeding tube you refused would have helped." "I'm not that far gone," Xalen muttered through his limited jaw movement. "I can still manage a smoothie. That counts." The Alarsi blinked its vertical eyelids. "Your dietary preferences are not a medical defense. I'll keep that in mind the next time I'm chewing air." "You aren't chewing anything." "Exactly." The medtech pulled a scanner from its belt and ran it along his side. "No marrow fractures. You may resume movement with caution. Do not sprint. Do not lift. Do not engage in further diplomatic exhibitions. I wasn't planning to wrestle anyone today." "You say that now." Xalen exhaled slowly and tilted his head back. "Can I at least leave this room? You may walk short distances. No physical strain. No sudden body position changes." Define sudden. "Anything you would do if startled by fire." He gave a small nod, then regretted it. "Understood." As the Alarsi packed up its kit, the door slid open without the usual chime. Cellari stepped inside, holding a sealed data capsule in one hand and a folded piece of fabric in the other. "You're being summoned," she said. Xalen didn't move. "Summoned by who?" "Joint Accord Ethics Board. They want a briefing." "About what?" She held up the capsule. "Apparently, your performance has created a procedural dilemma." The Varnok delegation submitted a request to redefine acceptable species tolerance thresholds using you as a benchmark. He squinted. "That's not a compliment, is it? They're calling it the Xalen variable. That sounds like a lab experiment they lose funding for. They want to know if your reactions are standard for Earth humans." He rubbed his temples. "So I'm a statistical anomaly now. Statistical or not, you broke their assumptions. The board wants to verify how. I assume they're not asking for another punch." "No. They want to interview you in person. No recordings, no observers. Just you, 8 board members, and a chair that's probably too tall." Xalen groaned quietly. Cellari held up the folded fabric. "You'll need to wear this." He unfolded it carefully. It was a formal Accord tunic, dark gray with a single silver line running diagonally across the chest. The fabric was thicker than standard uniforms, its collar high and stiff. "No way this doesn't itch," he said. "Ceremonial threads always do. Feels like a punishment. Think of it as diplomatic armor." He stood slowly, pulling the tunic over his head with deliberate movements. When it was in place, he gave a small nod. "Let's get this over with." The ethics board met on level 6 of the Halidus, in a chamber made entirely of compressed glass stone. It gave the illusion of transparency without actually being see-through, which Xalen found vaguely insulting. The board members were already seated when he arrived, 8 figures, each from a different species, all watching him with varying degrees of curiosity and concern. The room was eerily quiet except for the soft hum of the ventilation system. He was directed to a single chair in the center. It was, as predicted, too tall. He climbed up, settled in with minimal grimacing, and waited. The first to speak was Atari, its voice dry and sharp, like leaves being crushed. You endured blunt force trauma that should have rendered you unconscious. You then participated in a thermally compromised maintenance protocol without prior conditioning. Do you consider these actions typical of your species? Depends on the human, Xalen said. Some of us run marathons through deserts for fun. Others faint at the sight of their own elbows. A soft ripple of confusion passed among the board. The Grell member leaned forward. You did not exhibit signs of panic while in the confined passage. How did you suppress your fear response? I didn't suppress it. I just didn't focus on it. I had a job to do. The Tarilai tapped its claws against the table. That is not a scientific explanation. You're asking a guy with a cracked jaw about psychology. I'm not a specialist. I just crawl through problems. The Corellian scribbled something. The Uric representative, who had observed the earlier duct demonstration, raised his ridged hand. Would you endure such conditions again, if required? Xalen paused. If something needed fixing? Yeah, the board murmured. The Alarsai member, whose cousin was likely the medtech who'd treated him earlier, adjusted its translator note. Our concern is not your willingness. It is your threshold. Your reaction to pain was delayed. Your recovery accelerated. We must determine whether this variance is individual or endemic to your species. That's going to be hard to pin down, Xalen said. Humans don't all respond the same way. Some recover quick. Some don't. Some can ignore pain, others can't. It's not uniform. The Tarilai tilted its head. Then how can your species be evaluated for resilience? He shrugged. We don't break the same way. That's the point. You can't design one test and expect it to apply to all of us. There was silence for several long seconds. The Grell leaned back. Then your species is unpredictable. Adaptable, Xalen said. It's different. The Corellian folded its notes and looked up. You may leave. Your input has been recorded. Xalen stood carefully, nodded once, and walked out without looking back. Later that evening, he sat in the observation deck, wrapped in a thermal blanket, sipping something that claimed to be broth and failing to taste much of anything. Cellari joined him, dropping into the seat beside him with a tired huff. They're going to table the reclassification. He raised an eyebrow. They've decided humans don't fit the standard model. Too many variables. You'll be listed as a non-uniform adaptive entity. That's a fancy way of saying they don't know what to do with us. Pretty much. He sipped his broth. I'll take it. She watched the stars for a while. You know, you could have refused all of it. The punch. The crawl. The board. I know. So why didn't you? He thought for a moment. Because they thought they understood us. Pain's not just a physical thing. It's how you respond to it. How you carry it. How you decide what to do next. You can't measure that with scans. She nodded slowly. You proved that. He gestured toward the stars. We're not the strongest. Not the fastest. But throw us into the fire, and we find a way to get through. Even if it hurts. Cellari looked over with a faint smile. You're going to be a legend after this. He leaned back. Great. All I ever wanted was to be remembered as the guy who got punched, crawled through a vent, and told a room full of aliens that humans are weird. You did more than that. I guess. They sat in silence for a while, watching distant planets drift by like slow-moving embers. Eventually, Xalen stood. Where are you going? Back to Mebe. My jaw's telling me it's had enough philosophy for one day. She stood too. Need help walking? No. But maybe someone to carry the broth. She picked it up. Let's go, variable. He groaned. Don't call me that. Too late. It's in the official record. They walked slowly down the corridor, two figures among many aboard a ship full of species still trying to understand each other. And for once, that felt like enough.